All right, so it's a couple minutes past from my end, 8:30 a.m. So why don't we get started with the presentation?
Awesome. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jamal James. I am a developer who built Polar. A bit about my background. I've been an application level developer for probably over 10 years now, doing, like I said, mostly application level development, on the web, desktop, mobile web, that type of thing, front end, back end development. And I got into Bitcoin in 2017, but hadn't started developing until 2018. And when I began developing, I chose to contribute to some open source projects, Zap Wallet and the Joule extension, and using Lightning because I wanted to learn. That was a big thing. I wanted to learn how to build applications on Lightning. And so I'll kind of tell you a bit about my experience. So this talk, kind of the beginning of this talk, is kind of going over the experience of building an application or applications on Lightning from a developer's perspective. That's an application level developer, someone building for the web, desktop, mobile, that type of thing. Um, so Polar is basically an application that allows you to very easily spin up a local reg test environment. If you're a Lightning developer, you're probably familiar with creating a reg test environment. It's basically a simulated Bitcoin and Lightning network, which uses fake coins and allows you to instantly mine on demand, because building against testnet on mainnet, you pretty much have to wait for blocks to mine every 10 minutes on their own. Sometimes the variance changes on when blocks get mined. So if you're developing and you want to be quick in terms of your fast feedback on your building your application, you definitely want a network you have a little bit more control over. So that's what the Reg Test Network is for. And Polar just wraps it up into a nice UI and easier to use interface. So again, like I mentioned, if you're new to Lightning and you're getting started, more than likely you started on lightning.engineering website, which has a great overview of the Lightning network, high-level overview as well as a installation guide and tutorial, which basically walks you through how to set up, install LND. I'm focused on LND for this presentation, but to install LND, how to build an application that can talk to the nodes and that stuff. So just some of you may be familiar with this already, but I'll just quickly highlight the steps just as a refresher on what's involved, to try to showcase why Polar is simpler. So typically you would install Go, because LND is written in the Go language. So that's a command line command. Uh, Following that, you'd have to pull LND from GitHub, pull the source code, and then compile it, which is a few commands, not that challenging. But in addition to LND, obviously you need the Bitcoin node. So the tutorial, which I referenced, instructs you to install BTCD, which is a Go implementation of a Bitcoin node, which has some commands on how to install that. When I began building, I started with BTCD, but then I wanted to use Bitcoin D simply because it represents a better match with a production environment in the real Bitcoin network or the mainnet. Over 90% of the nodes are Bitcoin D, so I wanted to make sure everything works locally. It kind of mimics what's in the mainnet. But tutorials for installing Bitcoin D can be a little challenging. Some recommend compiling from source if you're doing development, which I could spend 5 more slides on the commands to get that done. It's pretty daunting. Or you can just simply download the binaries from GitHub, and then for your operating system, and then install them into your path, and then you'll have a Bitcoin D node. And then the next step, you'd have to configure your bitcoin.conf with various parameters for reg tests, for RPC, the authentication, so like the LND node can communicate with the Bitcoin node, ZMQ, which is a notifications protocol. You have to configure that on the Bitcoin node and the Lightning node. And many of these parameters are, I mean, they're I wouldn't say easy to find. You know, you kind of got to do some research, dig up what parameters you need, what to set, um, and then hopefully you can next step start your Bitcoin node. And if you want to simulate a local network with multiple Lightning nodes, you can start up like 3 different nodes for LND. And this is basically the command line. Some of this you can put into the lnd.conf file, but the bold stuff, if you want, they have to vary per node. So you'll always have to put those in. And what typically happens is that entire process I just went through, if once you go through that, you never it never works on the first try. You're typically going to get some cryptic error message that you then have to go look on Stack Overflow or GitHub issues and repositories and try to figure out what went wrong. And so it can be a bit challenging. So what typically happens is you'll get it, it doesn't work, you'll go research, try it again, you get another issue and kind of repeat the process. And then so it could take up to 5 hours. For some people, I've heard it takes days to get a local network set up. But once you get that done, this is your network. So this is what my network looked like. I got 3 Lightning nodes, Alice, Bob, and Carol on the right, and a Bitcoin D node on the left top. And then on the bottom left is where I issue my commands to communicate with the nodes. And so obviously I don't want to have to type in all those commands again. So this is actually what my bash RC file, which is just setting up some aliases so that I can quickly just type a few characters in order to communicate with each node. So once you got the node set up, obviously you have to interact with them. So again, this is more, you know, primarily you're at the command line. So you're getting a new SegWit address in order to deposit coins into your node. So using LNCLI, you get a new address. And then using the Bitcoin CLI, you can mine nodes to that address or, you know, send coins somehow. One thing that's may not be obvious, but is very important is that 101 in the generate to address is the number of blocks. Something it's documented, but once you know it, you know it. And if you don't know it, it can be a pain, is that you have to generate 100 blocks in order for the mining rewards to mature and be spendable. So that might be a hiccup that gets you stuck when you're doing your development for the first time, setting up your environment. If you want to open the channel, a couple more commands to connect to the node, as well as to open the channel with the number of Satoshis. And if you want to get the gRPC or REST URL and credentials in order to connect to your node from your application, there's a couple more commands. You'll need to either convert the macaroon file to hex or base64 in order to communicate from your application, whether it be Python or JavaScript or Go or any language. You'll need the credentials in order to connect to it. So kind of all of this work is like just to get you to developing your application. And from my experience building, I felt there has to be a better way. So I decided to work on building Polar to make it better. So just to kind of set the stage of what an observation I made is that you have kind of different expectations depending on the stack that the developers are working on. So the protocol developers, you know, these guys, and from my observation, love keyboards. The keyboard shortcut guys, they are comfortable downloading source code, compiling. They use terminal-based code editors like Vim or Emacs, and they are comfortable spending pretty much all day on the command line. And their goal is like they're the bits and bytes guys. They're optimizing for efficiency use as little data as possible, transmit as little over the network as possible, and security, especially in the Bitcoin protocol where security is paramount. So, there's value in that, but the expectations of the developer tooling is different from app developers, which is a lot of my background, where we like to point and click. If I want to download some tool, I want to go online, download it, click install, and it works. That's pretty much all I want to do. We use visual editors like Xcode and Visual Studio or Eclipse, which have nice UIs, tabs, icons and menus and stuff like that. If there's no UI, as far as the app developer perspective is concerned, it's pretty much not going to get used much. Because app developers, we are optimizing, we're building applications for humans, whereas protocol developers are building applications for machines. So there's a different concept. So I bring that up just to state that, the flow that I just went through of getting your dev environment set up was kind of structured or built by protocol developers who are comfortable in that environment. So for application developers, I wanted to work on something that made it a lot easier to get started. And I think it'll help onboard more developers who aren't comfortable on the command line or in those things. So Polar is a desktop application that runs on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And this is a screenshot of what Polar looks like with the network up and running. You basically can get a visual graph of your nodes, both Bitcoin and Lightning, as well as a sidebar that gives you tons of useful information that you need in developing your application. So I'll actually give you a high level of some of the things that Bitcoin can do. So obviously you can create a network, and if you click, and it's not just one network, you can create multiple networks. You can even have multiple networks running at the same time if you like. You can display the RPC credentials and API information in order to know what to put into your application to connect to it, to the nodes. You can quickly add nodes, mine blocks, make lightning payments from within Polar if you need to, open and close channels. And there's also a terminal there for the more advanced users that want a command line to be able to do full access to the nodes. So I'll jump into a quick demo and show you just how Polar works. So there's Polar. Let's minimize that. So actually getting Polar is simply very easy. You can go to the GitHub. I hope to have a website up pretty soon. And from the website, you simply just go to the releases and you can download the version for your operating system, and it's out there, and install the normal way, that pretty much you install every application. So once you got Polar up and running, you can simply just click on create a Lightning network, give it a name, tell it how many nodes you want, and it generates a network for you. Now these nodes are not running, so I'll go ahead and start it. So what this is doing is basically, instead of having to run all those command lines to download the code, install, configure the configuration files, this is basically doing all of that for you with one click. So you can see our Bitcoin node is up and running, our Lightning nodes are still booting up. And now with our Bitcoin node up, we can easily just mine blocks by going to, clicking on the node, clicking mine block, and you can see that the block height has changed both here and here. You can mine as many blocks as you want, and it's just a click of a button. So instead of having to type a command at the terminal, you just click mine and you got blocks generated. From a LND node perspective, when you click on one, it gives you some of the useful information, or things that I found that I was needing to reference often, such as the balances, the alias, pub key, and some information about whether it's synced to chain on the channels. There's a connect tab, which basically gives you all of that RPC information. So whether you're connecting via gRPC or REST, you can just quickly copy the URLs. And if you need to connect to your node, you'll need the certificates and the macaroons. And so I know when developing or using other apps, there are different formats. So you can actually get that in base64 hex, or there's also L&D Connect, which was um, used by the Zap wallet, which is kind of a standard for basically merging the certificate, macaroon, and the host all into a single string, which is easier to copy and paste into an application. Now, under the Actions tab, you basically get the ability to deposit funds into a node. So if I wanted to deposit 1,000,000 sats into Alice, I just quickly click on that. And now you can see I deposited 1,000,000 sats into Alice. You can see it there. And if I wanted to open a channel, I can just click outgoing, choose the destination node I want to go to. So Bob, give it the amount of sats, 250, click OK. And now I have a channel created from Alice to Bob with 250,000 sats, and I can see how much is on the source and how much is on the destination. There's another way to create a channel by just simply dragging and dropping, and this will just pre-fill the form fields. And notice it recognizes that Bob doesn't have a wallet balance to open the channel, so it offers the suggestion to automatically deposit funds into his node. And so now I have a Lightning network with 3 network nodes, which I spun up in just a couple minutes. So now in order to show you how you can use it in your application development, I'm actually going to launch the Zap wallet, which I've used or done some contributions to. And I'm going to basically pretend like I'm developing the Zap wallet and I need to test it and connect my development Zap wallet to my Lightning nodes in Polar. So if I click connect, in order to tell Zap to connect to a wallet, again, Zap can take the host, certificate, and macaroon, but I'm going to use the L&D connect because that's easier. So I'm going to connect to Carol, L&D connect, paste that there, click next, next, and I'm connected. So Zap can connect to RegTest networks, and if I look under my channels, Zap knows I have a channel with Bob, and all the balance is on Bob's side. So why don't we try to send a payment from Alice to Carol? If I click receive, we'll just do 150K Satoshis, click request. I'll copy that invoice. And then in Alice, I'll come here. Another thing I forgot to mention is that you also do have access to the terminal, so I can just quickly launch that. And I could do CLI, invoice, paste in the invoice, confirm it. And my application that I'm developing, Zap, has received the payment, says it's received. If I go to my channels and refresh, you can see that 150 sats have moved now on the local side to the remote balance. And also, if I come back in Polar, one nice thing is you can just quickly refresh and you can see the channels themselves actually show the balance from one node to the other in the UI. And if you click on that, you can see that the balance is transferred. And you'll notice that that payment did route through Bob because the balance updated on both channels. So another cool thing you can do is you can add new nodes by just simply dragging and dropping them onto the canvas. And that'll basically, even while the network's running, you just drag it and you got a new node. I could drag and open up more channels here. Carol doesn't have a balance, but if I want to go from Alice. And see, I got a channel. So that's an up and running L&D node with all of the same information. If I wanted to create a new network, I can just add another network. I can give this 2 nodes, click start, and you can see I can have multiple networks running or booting up, running simultaneously, and Polar allows that to work. You can easily dispose of these networks just by clicking on delete. So you basically just get the capability of creating, removing, adding Lightning networks just real easy with just a few clicks in just a few minutes. I'm going to go back to the slides just to give you a kind of high level on how Polar is built. So basically, underneath the hood, Polar is a React application built with TypeScript and Electron. Electron is just a cross-platform desktop application platform that allows you to kind of write your code once and have it run on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And Docker, which, if you're not familiar, is a virtualization platform or engine that allows you to run Linux containers on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So what Polar does is when you click on Create Network, it basically writes this Docker Compose file to your hard drive. This Docker Compose file is just basically like a schema. It describes the schema. It's a text file that describes the schema of your network, which nodes are in the network, which ports they should open up, which commands to run, which images to use. And so when you click on Start Network, it tells the Docker engine, use this compose file and create a virtual environment. And when it boots up, Docker will create these 4 containers, 1 for the Bitcoin D node and 3 for the LND nodes. And then Polar just simply, using the same RPC ports that your application can use, communicates in order to get information, to mine blocks, to open channels, to make deposits. So Polar basically uses the same RPC APIs that your application can use. And finally, just a high-level look at what I'm looking to plan on adding. The goal for me is to make developing on Lightning just a simple, to get started process to be as simple as possible. Just simply download this application and you get your local network set up. But I also want to support the other implementations. So C-Lightning, which actually just merged into Master. So that'll be in the next release, and also want to add an Eclair for developers building on those implementations. I like the idea of having shareable network templates. So like a kind of startup configuration. So choose my network, and it comes with 4 nodes in a circular channel pattern already configured to just start it up, or snapshots if you want to kind of take a look at your a network that you built along with all the channels and data, and just kind of archive it for reuse at another time to easily import or export those snapshots from the application. I'd love to get some UI-based API explorers, or the Block Explorer, or REST and gRPC explorers, so that you can interact with the APIs, the full APIs of the nodes, without having to go to the command line. And then finally, some starter projects. So to be able to, a common question or that I could see is, I create a network with Polar. Okay, what do I do now? So I like to have like some starter projects that just says, okay, click here, save this project to your disk, and now you have a Python project which can connect to the nodes you just built in Polar. And would love to build those in multiple different languages.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jamal. I really appreciate your presentation. I think it's super cool. I love how interactive it is. Like even visualizing the Lightning Network channels, I think is super helpful, especially if you're coming to Lightning development for the first time. But we're
Right.
gonna have to, yeah, we're gonna have to cut this short. I'm really sorry. We have to set up for our next session. So
No problem.
I dropped this link to our Slack. So if you guys want to join that Slack, I invited Jamal on there as well. And if you guys have any further questions, he'll be able to answer that for you. We're going to host this. We're going to post this free webinar on our Slack as well. So look for that